Welcome everybody to this discussion of digital banking in the Middle East. I've spent quite a bit of time around the Middle East, particularly in recent months, and so what I'm going to do is give you a perspective around how I see the region. Not pretending to be a complete expert in the region, but I have spent many years traveling around the Middle East, going back to the early 2000s, and have seen the transformation in the economies there, particularly the growth of the Dubai financial centre along with the Qatar and Bahrain financial centres, which I'm going to touch on, and give a view around how I think fintech can play out and digital banking can play out in the region. What's the key aspect of the region is that it's a region that doesn't scale very easily because there's a lot of countries with a very small population, as can be seen from this chart outlining the demographics of the region. The largest country is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, but even that's half the size of the UK, and a lot of the other countries are just 1 million, 2 million people, so large cities by comparison to other regions of the world. And in these areas you can see on the second line here that an awful lot of the people, particularly in UAE and Qatar, are from overseas. So they have expectations of banking services that are based on their experiences in other countries. Many people coming from Europe and from Asia. So particularly seeing that different requirements and different expectations amongst the mindset of the customer is a key aspect of the region. Also, when you look at the actual bank assets and the size of the banks, it's a very wealthy region, and I think many of us will know that, along with a lot of people, because they're from overseas, particularly from India for example, looking for strong remittance support to send money home. So you've got a wide range of differing needs to serve here as a digital bank player, from the people who just want basic money transmittance services to those who want full service digital banking to those who want ultra high net worth wealth management. And that's a key factor in looking at how digital banking plays out in the Middle East. When you look at what's happening in the region, most people do have a smartphone, surprise surprise, and most of the people will be using their smartphones for social media and email messaging, and also to a lesser extent banking. In fact, it's quite surprising that the bank take-up of mobile banking services is very low, and there are reasons for this which I'll come on to later, but when you look at in particular the use of social media, I think we see some interesting trends. This is a graph of a presentation given by Facebook at the conference I was chairing in Abu Dhabi a couple of weeks ago. And what you see here is the numbers for across the Middle East, people using Facebook, 152 million people accessing every month, and 92 million or 61% of the monthly active people return every single day. And many of them using their mobile phones for making choices and for discussions. In fact, when we look at the region, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain in particular are at a level of take-up of digital servicing that's at the same levels as the USA and Europe. So again, you've got people, particularly expats in this case, expecting high levels of digital servicing, and then it tails off as you look at the rest of the GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council countries. Now, social media is a key influencer on financial decisions, and I'm not sure that this is well understood in any region of the world, but particularly I don't think it's well understood in the Middle East because, again, as we'll see as we look at how satisfied customers are with their digital bank services, that they're not particularly satisfied, to be honest. You know, over half of customers are following their banks on social media. 2/3 are relying on social media as a source of information for their banking decisions, particularly increasing higher amongst senior customers, which is an interesting factor. And middle-aged customers are most active in discussing their banks on social media in particular. So it's a key demographic factor that social media is the platform for reaching the customer. And yet, when we look at what the banks are actually doing, they're not service. And this is from the Ernst & Young World Islamic Banking Competitiveness Report, which is a really useful report if you want to look at this in more depth. I can recommend it to you. And what you see here is that in every region in the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, most customers are not really using mobile banking. It's highest in UAE because of the expat community, but they're not satisfied with mobile banking. They don't believe the experience is a good one. And 3 out of 4 customers are ready to switch their banks for a better digital experience. 2/3 of customers would feel comfortable switching to a digital first relationship. And so this to me is a critical factor in the Middle East, that right now what we're seeing is, as I've mentioned earlier on, 3 different constituencies: the expat community, the ultra high net worth community, and the money transfer community, all with different requirements. But in particular, most have smartphones, most are using social media, most expect to have digital relationships with their banks, and they're not getting those relationships from their banks because their banks are not offering the right services. They're not giving the right experiences. And I think that will change, because as we see the growth of internet commerce and mobile internet commerce in particular, there's a huge untapped opportunity in the region. This shows the difference between the UK and the Middle East countries, particularly the GCC countries, in using internet for retailing. And right now you've got a flatlining Middle Eastern view of the world, and yet a massive boom in the UK's take-up of mobile internet particular servicing. And this is where I think the untapped potential lies, and we're going to see a lot of companies, particularly fintech companies, focusing on the needs of the digital first customer, the needs of the expats, the remittance corridors, the ultra high net worth, and the e-commerce mobile internet opportunities. And so let's look at what internet and fintech could do in the Middle East region. And in my discussions in the last couple of months in visiting Qatar, Bahrain, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi, I get a very strong feeling that there are 3 distinct major Middle Eastern opportunities for fintech. And that's what I wanted to finish my opening discussions today in exploring a little more depth. Right now you have 3 major financial centers vying for different focus, and they all want to be fintech hubs. Again, London, Singapore specifically are fintech hubs, and Dubai is currently the 18th largest global financial center in the world. Qatar is 32nd, Bahrain is 40th according to the Global Financial Centers Index. There's an aspiration, obviously, to become part of the top 5, and it's intriguing when you look back to the history here that, in the early 2000s, none of these were considered financial centers. So it's a very new and young market space with a dynamic and diverse community growing very quickly, and it wouldn't surprise me if by the middle of the next decade, certainly Dubai could get into the top 10 global financial centers index ratings, and Bahrain and Qatar would also be in the top 25, because the fintech opportunity sits glaringly, obviously, for these 3 major financial centers. And a fintech constituency comprises not just having ports creating that service. Obviously the regulatory environment and government environment has to support creating a financial technology ecosystem. But equally there needs to be partnerships and opportunities to work with the financial institutions in the region, as well as a ecosystem for startups, companies, and the media and research and academia and consumer support for such a system. And this is what I'm starting to see growing within the region, and it's only really hit the radar in the last 12 months, to be honest, but it's not too late. It's interesting, for example, that a year ago I visited Tokyo, and Japan didn't really have a fintech ecosystem, but they've created one in the last 12 months. And I certainly see specifically Dubai, Bahrain, Qatar creating a fintech constituency. But what will they create it for? What will that ecosystem be doing? Well, the 3 areas I think that stand out for the region are the South-South connection, as in connecting Africa, Asia, Latin America as a global financial center hub. Because of the ultra-high net worth focus, a wealth tech capability, which is untapped. And equally, you would think, because Bahrain, for example, issued the first Sukuk bond, that you'd have a large Islamic financial center in the region. But right now, Kuala Lumpur is probably the center rather than somewhere in the Middle East. But I think Islamtech could be something that the region could grow as a hub and get recognition for. And if you get a Islamic fintech center in the Middle East, one of these three major centers, Qatar, Bahrain, Dubai, then the rest of the fintech community will probably follow. So looking at these three in a little bit more depth, I've already mentioned that Dubai is a major financial center now, the 18th largest in the world, and it's only 13 years old. In fact, it's not even that, it's just over 12 years old. And I blogged the other day about that China and India and Brazil are what I call the growth economies. They're not developing, they've developed, but they're actually growing and innovating far faster than what I call the legacy economies of America and Europe. And the reason why Europe and America are legacy economies is because they had a lot of infrastructure a long time before the internet came around, and they find it hard to adapt to the needs of the mobile internet world of today, whereas China, when you look at Ant Financial, Baidu and Tencent, for example, or India with the demonetization program and Paytm, is definitely a growth economy. And then you have what I call the innovation economies, which are Philippines, Indonesia, Sub-Saharan Africa, where the mobile wallet community is reinventing how we transact and deal with money and finance. And I think for the region, specifically for the Dubai Center, there's a great opportunity to do this South-South connectivity between the growth and the innovation economies, rather than focusing on the legacy economies of Europe and America, where fintech's already developed quite significantly. It hasn't developed so significantly across this South-South divide region. It's just starting. So there's a major opportunity there for South-South tech. Wealth tech, but it's again only a recent phenomena. It's something that's become a sort of phrase only in the last 12 months or so, and specifically you've got Switzerland and Singapore and Hong Kong leading the way with the wealth tech community. But when you think of the ultra high net worth and high net worth Middle Eastern communities based on the oil riches of the past and the current riches generated through tourism and trade, then certainly a wealth tech center in one of the major financial hubs would make sense. Which one it would be to be determined, because this is just emerging in the Middle East. And then Islamic fintech, or Islamtech as I like to call it for short, is obviously something that should be in the Middle East region as a hub. And certainly from my discussions in UAE and Bahrain, there's a big focus on starting to generate Islamtech interest. And one of the key things about Islamtech is that the technology of distributed ledger blockchain makes absolute sense for this service, and that when you look at Islamic Sharia compliant financial instruments, the compliance with the Quran and Sharia law varies by country and region, and it may be that you're investing in an Islamic financial instrument that breaks some of your own beliefs purely because the imams in that country do not enforce Sharia law as rigidly as you would. Now, distributed ledger technology gives you transparency of exactly how investments are being made and where they're going and whether they're compliant with Sharia law and to the level of your beliefs in that Sharia law. So I think that's going to be a really interesting development around distributed ledger blockchain technologies and Islam tech for the transparency and capability. And it is already on the case in this instance, in that the country has announced that all government contracts will be on blockchains by 2020. This is an ambition announced at the end of last year by the Dubai government, and already they've announced that they've selected IBM and Consensus to develop the products for a nationwide blockchain service. And this is going to be everything from identities and passports through to government contracts with developers and contractors, through to the whole way in which trade is done. And if you don't believe they'll do it, then think again, because this is amazing. When I went to Dubai, I mean, I always find Dubai amazing, to be honest, because if they want to do something, they just do it. And so, for example, this is the picture here of the Dubai Canal, which was just opened at the end of last year. And down at the bottom right, you can see a 10-lane motorway, sorry, 8-lane motorway that goes through the centre of Dubai. They just lifted up the motorway to put the canal in. It was all completed in 18 months. This is a massive development through the centre of the city, and the key thing I'm getting at here is that in Middle East, and specifically in Dubai, Bahrain, Qatar, which are major financial centres, you're going to see wealth tech, Islam tech, blockchain, South-South trade servicing, and other key developments pushing the economy to become one of the most significant financial centres in the world over the next 10 years. And that's going to be incredible to watch and exciting to watch. Meantime, just off, we mustn't forget that there's a huge migrant population in this region developing those services, like moving motorways to build canals, and a lot of that community are coming from the east of the Middle East, as in India and other economies from Asia. And so the remittance corridors and mobile wallets is going to be the final key service that I think will be critical to people who are working in the Gulf countries. And when you look at the fact that most of the people that they're sending money to back home probably don't have bank accounts, then mobile financial inclusion is going to be a major factor. I'm just about to visit Karachi in Pakistan next month, and I was looking at the numbers here, for example, that financial inclusion is just 15% in a country that has the 5th largest youth population in the world. And young people are rabid internet and mobile internet users, as can be seen. 61% are social media users in Pakistan. A lot of the youth in Pakistan are migrant workers or will be migrant workers wanting to send money home. So servicing the unbanked and the underbanked is going to be a final critical factor that I think we'll see in the Middle East becoming something that's going to be something worth watching. So in summary, Islamic financial instruments based on technologies powered by blockchain, distributed ledger blockchain services overall, particularly leadership through Dubai's implementation of those services in the next 3 years, ultra high net worth servicing through technology and wealth tech, trade across Africa, Asia, Latin America, specifically trade supported through mobile wallets and financial inclusion, are all going to be the hot topics for digital financial services in the Middle East over the next 10 years. And I find the region amazing, vibrant and fascinating.